So I think next week I'll be bringing to you guys my updated championship predictions for how I see the league table finishing. We've only got 13 games left of this season, and what I thought we'd do today is sort of a precursor to that video. We'll be looking at the runnings of each championship side, either going for automatic promotion or hopeful to finish in the playoffs come the end of the season, deciding how many points realistically they'll each need to pick up if they do want to achieve that come the end of the season, and then we'll have a bit of a feeling about how the league table will be shaping up come the end of the year. And I'd be interested to know from you guys, how do you think the top 6 is going to shape up come the end of the season? I'll also do a separate video in the next following days about sides at the bottom of the table. Before we do hop into that though, of course, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors over at OneFootball. As well, you can find their link in the top line of the description down below. Over on the OneFootball app, you can keep up to date with all the latest ongoings in the championship. You can check out the championship table at the moment, where there really is not much in it, both at the bottom where it's getting closer week in, week out, and at the top of the championship it's still very all to play for, going for automatic promotion and in those playoff spots. So over on the OneFootball app, you can check out all the latest news going on around the footballing world. I'd highly recommend. So looking at the current championship table, the top 2 currently stands as West Brom and Leeds, with Fulham, Brentford, Forest and North then making up the rest of the top 6. As the playoff chasers, who could realistically still make it into the playoffs in my opinion, we're probably looking down to Swansea. Although saying that, looking at the league table from this time last season, we can see Aston Villa currently sat in 11th, 8 points off the playoffs, and they ended up being promoted. So it goes to show that if anyone does in that region of the table put together a miraculous run between now and the end of the season, it's not too late. We'll start out at the top of the championship and then work our way downwards. So currently leading the way in the championship, we do have West Brom and Leeds. Now, over the past 10 or so championship seasons, to achieve automatic promotion, on average you'd need to pick up around 86 points. Obviously, we have had some seasons where that's been way higher and way lower. So let's take 86 points as the benchmark to be promoted from the championship this season. If that was to be the case, then West Brom would need 23 points from their last 13 games of the season. That would be an average of 1.7 points per game, which for West Brom, and we'll look at their fixtures in a minute, I think that's quite feasible for them. Leeds would need 27 points, which is an average of 2 points per game. Then reading further down, Fulham need 30, Brentford 31, Forest 31, which is all about 2.3 points per game, and then Preston and Bristol City would need 33 points from our last 13 matches, which will be an average of 2.5 points per game, so that's quite unfeasible. So realistically, for automatic promotion, we're focusing on the top 5. So without any further ado, we'll go through those top 5 sides, look at their running from now to the end of the season, and decide who we think has got the best run in. So starting out with West Brom, who currently lead the way in the championship. Like we mentioned before, for them to go on and secure promotion, they'll need to pick up around about 1.7 points per game in their last 13 fixtures. They also still have the FA Cup to deal with. They've got Newcastle coming up in a couple of weeks. But looking at their running from now to the end of the season, I think they've got an alright running. They've got 4 of the top 7 still to play this season, with Bristol City and Preston being the next 2 fixtures. After that, things do ease up for them a little bit, and I still think they've got enough winnable games that you would expect West Brom to get through from now to the end of the season, that West Brom really should be going up. After the next 2, the fixtures ease up a little bit. They do still have Brentford away to play and Fulham at home as well, and they've got a couple of other potential banana skins in there. You know, Blackburn away is not going to be an easy one for them either. At this stage of the season, I think what you want most though is to be playing sides in mid-table. You know, if you're playing the bottom 3 at the moment and they've not been relegated, they're still playing for something. Sides in mid-table, especially towards the end of the season, tend to take their foot off the gas, and I think that West Brom do have quite a few of those sides to play. So for that reason, I think West Brom are looking really strong for promotion. And then we move on to Leeds. Now, if Leeds want to hit the sort of benchmark to be promoted, then they'll need to pick up 27 points from their next 13 matches, which means 9 wins from 13. Can I see 9 wins from 13 in there? To be honest, on paper, I think they've actually got a really favourable running compared to everyone else around them. They've only got 1 of the top 7 still to play. That's Fulham, and that game's at home. But I think for that reason, because they've got the favourable running, that'll make Leeds fans even more nervous. With the way they fell off last season, I think it was that game at home against Sheffield United which set them on the wobble, and then from then on they never really recovered. On paper, I think Leeds have got the best running, but if you look at each game individually, you could see Leeds slipping up here and there in that one, and that's when the cracks start to appear a little bit. I mean, they've still got a lot of Yorkshire rivals still to play. They've got Hull away, Huddersfield and Barnsley at home. They're all going to want to disrupt Leeds' flow throughout the season, and then for me personally, it's the away matches which are going to be really determine what happens to Leeds this season. They've got away games against Cardiff, Blackburn, Swansea and Derby County. It's those 4 matches which I think are going to turn out to be crucial, because I think their home form will be quite strong between now and the end of the season. I mean, that Derby game towards the end of the season is going to be an absolute cracker. So Leeds do find themselves in an interesting position. I'd be interested to know from Leeds fans, how confident are you at the moment for promotion? So going on to the teams that are currently chasing down Leeds for that second spot, Fulham are the first side. Now, Fulham had an absolute disaster class at the weekend. They lost 3-0 to Barnsley. Will they be able to pick themselves up for it and go for the rest of the season? Looking at their fixture list, we've said before that Leeds probably have the best run in. I'd say that Fulham have the worst. The reason being they've still got to play all of the top 7, whereas Leeds only have to play one of them. Fulham have to play every side still around them. Added to that as well, their record against the top 7 so far this season hasn't been very good. Bristol City, Preston, Nottingham Forest and Brentford have all beaten Fulham so far this season. The only top 7 side that Fulham have walked away with all 3 points from this season so far has been Leeds at home. So for that reason, looking at the running that they've got, it's looking really tricky for them. If they do want to reach that benchmark of 86 points like we mentioned before, then they're going to need to pick up 30 points from their next 13 matches. And looking at those fixtures, I don't know how feasible that would be. I think the particular running that will show us what Fulham are made of this season comes next week, where they face Preston, Bristol City, Brentford and Leeds all back to back to back. We've said it a few times on the channel so far this season, you know, has Scott Parker been carried by this Fulham squad? Scott Parker's really going to have to show his managerial prowess in these next few fixtures if Fulham are going to be in with a shout of going on and achieving automatic promotion, because there's no doubt they've got the squad in there to do it. And it's going to be those games where we really see what Fulham are made of. Can they do it? I'm not so sure looking at that run in. So moving on to Brentford, who are currently 1 point below Fulham, and looking at their running compared to Fulham's, it's probably Brentford who may end as the stronger side this season and may be that rival for Leeds going for automatic promotion, maybe a little bit more. Looking at their fixtures, they've only got 3 of the top 7 still to play. 2 of those games are also at Griffin Park. So the only side away from home that they're facing, currently sat in the top 7, is against Fulham, and that one really could be a crunch match deciding what happens this season. And it's after those 2 games against both Fulham and West Brom that Brentford, I think, could have a really strong end to the season. Like those 7 games on paper for Brentford, I think they're capable of winning all of them. If they were able to string a run together then, I think Brentford could then be looking really strong for promotion. You know, we've all seen Brentford's capabilities going forward with BMWs that's able to blow people out the water, especially playing a lot of sides in and around mid-table and the bottom of the Championship who may not have that much to play for come the final few weeks of the season. They do have my side Preston to play towards the end, but our record's not great at Griffin Park. Obviously, it's all very up in the air at the moment as to who will go and achieve promotion, but looking at that run-in for Brentford, I might be fancying them, you know, to really push Leeds all the way. Then we move on to Nottingham Forest, probably the last of the feasible sides who could go on and achieve automatic promotion this season based on the current league table. I'd also say that they've got a very similar run into Brentford where it's looking quite favourable for them. I could see them potentially putting a run together from now until the end of the season. They've got 3 of the top 7 still to play. 2 of those games are at home. And currently out of the top 7, no one's got a better record against those sides than Nottingham Forest. I mean, we look at the last 3 meetings they've had with West Brom, Leeds and Brentford in recent weeks. They picked up 7 points from a possible 9 out of those 3 games. They're in a good run of form at the moment, and I'd certainly say that when they're at full strength, there's enough winnable games in there for them to go in and push for it as well. Do they have what it takes? With a side like Forest, they probably do rise to the occasion more when they are playing the top 7, and then when they are playing some of the sides below them, they tend to slip up a little bit more. So it's a quite an interesting one when you're judging Forest, really. But those are currently the top 5 in the Championship who probably have the most realistic chances of going on and finishing in the top 2. So now we will move on into the race for the top 6. If we are applying the same logic that we were to that top 2 race that we are for the playoffs, then on average over the past 10 seasons in the Championship, it's taken 74 points to finish in the top 6. Once again, sometimes that's higher, sometimes that's lower, but on average it's around about 74 points. So let's go through those sides who are hoping to finish in the top 6 come the end of the season and discuss how many points they'll realistically need to pick up between now and the end of the season. So in my team, Preston North End, who currently sits 6th in the Championship, we still have to play 5 of the top 7, and it's a really tricky run in my opinion. So if North End do want to go on and achieve 74 points, which has been the benchmark to make it into the top 6 over the past 10 years, we'll need 21 points from our final 13 matches, which is an average of around about 1.6 points per game. But that running really does look tricky. There's so many potential banana skins and sort of bogey matches for North End in there that everything seems to be against us. Those 2 fixtures against West Brom and Fulham away back-to-back is going to be crucial. So as well as facing those sides in the top 7, other sides which I'm not looking forward to going up against, Derby we never seem to do well against, they're a real bogey side for us. Sheffield Wednesday at Hillsborough, we never seem to pick up results there either. So if we do manage to make it in, we really will have earned it. I'll leave another poll for you guys to vote on for who you're fancying for the playoff chase, because this one could go right down to the wire, especially considering the last game of the season is Bristol City against Preston. And speaking about Bristol City, I would say they have a slightly easier run in the North End, although it's still a fairly tricky one with some tough games peppered throughout. They've still got 4 of the top 7 to play. Games against West Brom, Fulham, Nottingham Forest and and Preston North End. Signings made in January could turn out to be the pivotal turning point for Bristol City, and if someone like Nahki Wells hits a real hot streak for them for the remainder of this season, Bristol City are that sort of side who can put together a string of results. And if they want to hit that benchmark of 74 points, they'll need about 7 more wins this season, which I do think they're capable of doing. Although saying that, Bristol City is such an up and down side that you never quite know where their level's going to be at. They could be that side that completely falls off a cliff at the end of the season and ends up finishing like 11th or something. So then with Blackburn winning 4 of their last 5 championship matches, they've soared up the championship recently and are now only 3 points off the top 6. Looking at their fixture running for the remainder of the season, given the way that they're playing, if they're able to sustain that from now until the end of the season, I actually fancy them in quite a few of these games, I have to say. Especially in the games they have at Ewood Park. You know, they face Bristol City, Leeds and West Brom all at Ewood Park in the tail end of the season, as well as facing Brentford away at the weekend. Blackburn have come straight back into form despite the injuries that they've currently got in just the nick of time, and they definitely shouldn't be underestimated in the playoff picture. If Blackburn were to go on and reach that benchmark of 74 points at the end of the season, then they need to pick up 24 points in their last 13 fixtures, so the level of play would have to be really high. They need to average 1.8 points per game, which is very high, but with their current run of consistency, they shouldn't be wrote off for doing that. Cardiff are also in quite a similar position to Blackburn, in which they've been sort of here and there in mid-table throughout the season, but have recently hit on a really good patch of form. They're unbeaten in their last 7 matches. Throughout the season, they've been really good at home. They've had a strong home record, but recently they've been picking up points away from home as well, which has really propelled them up the table. They've won their last 2 games on the road, but looking at their fixture list compared to Blackburn, it's definitely Cardiff who have got the harder run in. They've still got 6 of the top 7 still to play, and I suppose that when you are the chasing side, could that be seen as an advantage? You know, it's a chance to take points off the teams above you and to really close that gap, you know, the sort of 6 pointers that we talk about. But for them to have that run of fixtures and for them to have to average around about 1.8 points per game for the rest of this season to go on and achieve the playoffs, that would be some ask. And if they did make it, fair play to them, but with that run in, how likely is it? I'm not too sure. Now moving on to Millwall next, this is a very intriguing one for me. Now Millwall got back to winning ways last weekend at Deepdale, beating North End by 1-0. I was absolutely blown away by how organised they were, but how ruthless they were going forward. You know, if they finished more of their chances, which they created several of, they really would have put us to the sword earlier on in that game. But Millwall and the system they play are such an awkward side to go up against, and looking at their running compared to everyone else going for the top 6 this season, I think they've got a really quite favourable run in there of fixtures. They've only got 2 of the top 7 still to play, and other than that, I see a lot of winnable games in there for Millwall. The games they have at the Den especially, I'd be expecting them to win the majority of them with how they play there. Their standard would have to be incredibly high if they were going to make it into the playoffs with the current gap between them. They'd need to pick up around about 1.9 points per game if they did want to hit that 74 point mark. But with their fixtures compared to everyone else above and below them, Millwall may just be a dark horse for it. Then finishing off with Swansea, who are probably the last sort of feasible side to go and make it into the playoffs, unless we were to have something miraculous going on with some of the sides below them, which we'll briefly discuss at the end. But Swansea are currently 5 points off the playoffs. They don't find themselves on a great run at the moment. They're without a win in their last 5 matches. A lot of draws for them recently. If they did want to push for that top 6, they really would have to turn their fortunes around, and draws just wouldn't be enough for the rest of the season. They'd need to average 2 points per game if they wanted to hit that 74 point mark. They still have 5 of the top 7 to play, and with Swansea you get that feeling where they may have left it too late for that real playoff push. I mean, those last sort of 4 fixtures especially, I think are looking really tough on paper. I think Swansea might be one of those clubs who are looking back at the end of the season and thinking, if only we hadn't dropped points in this game here and this game there. You know, we look at the last one, a 4-4 draw against Hull. Before that, a goalless draw against QPR. You know, Stoke had done the double over them this season. A lot of games where they should have done better, but ultimately the top 6 may have just slipped away from them. But there we have it, guys. That is the current playoff picture and how it is currently shaping up. Now, we do have 3 sides below Swansea who are all on 44 points, 9 points away from the top 6. Could any of them feasibly put a run together? Either Sheffield Wednesday, Derby County or Birmingham. Wednesday at this point, I think a lot of people will be discounting because they are on an awful run of form. But Derby and Birmingham, especially since the start of 2020, have actually been playing some decent football and have been picking up a lot of points recently. But to really bridge that gap, that would take some doing. If they were to hit that 74 point mark, then they'd each need to average 2.3 points per game, which at this stage of this season would be an unbelievable ask. Like, I don't even see the top two averaging 2.3 points per game with how inconsistent everyone's been this season. But that will go on to wrap it up for today's video, guys. So my final thoughts are West Brom, I think, have enough winnable games between now and the end of the season that they should be promoted. In terms of that second spot, Leeds, I think, have a very favourable run-in, but that could play against them with their tendencies of how they fall away later on in the season. Fulham, I think, have got it really tough. Brentford and Forest, I think, could push Leeds all the way and probably sway more towards Brentford with their run-in. Then for the race for the top six, the sides that are currently there, I think Bristol City have the points on the board and have a semi-okay run-in. Preston, I think, have got it quite tough. As a potential dark horse, I'm not ruling out Millwall at this point in time. I really think like they could shake up the pack. But guys, there you have it. That will now wrap it up for today's video. So if you're going to enjoy, make sure to leave a like. It is always massively appreciated. Get all your thoughts in the comments down below as to what you are fancying to happen come the end of the season. Make sure you subscribe for a bit of regular Championship content as well. But other than that, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.